Hello, hello, and welcome to my first sort of holiday like office hours Q&A. So if you guys have questions about the things that you are planning on making for gifting this year, be it the formulations that I've been sharing very recently or some of my past formulations, or if you're looking for suggestions, you're you're in the right place. So thank you so much for being here. I'd love a little, like, if you are here and you're watching, let me know where you are from. That's always really neat to see sort of how globally dispersed everyone is. That's always very, very cool. For anybody who is, I guess, new to Humblebee and me, my name is Marie. I am the one person who does all the Humblebee and me things, and I'm here in Calgary, Canada today. So if you have questions about the things that you are making this year, definitely throw them in the live chat, and I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can today. Let's see here. Hello to eDubs and Malgorzata. Apologies if I have butchered your name. Latanya from Cleveland, Ohio. Misty from Jacksonville, Florida. Malgorzata is from France. Very cool. I love seeing how how everybody is from all over the world. That is so lovely. From California, I see. San Francisco, from Maryland. Lots of Americans. Lancashire, UK. London, UK. Cool. Got a couple. Two Wendy's, both from the United Kingdom. Oh, and a fellow Canadian, Ruth from Vancouver. Awesome. I have plans of being in Vancouver for Christmas. Well, very briefly, passing through Vancouver soonish. So looking forward to that. I haven't been to Vancouver in quite a while. Israel, Macedonia, somebody else from London. Oh, very cool. So yeah, if you have questions, I'm going to kind of get into the questions part. So throw your questions in the live chat. I did want to touch on a few that I have received recently as kind of a get us started thing. If you have been watching the daily videos that I have been sharing, I'm halfway through a series of 4 videos where I make my first ever Glycerite. It's a cranberry Glycerite, which we'll be using in an upcoming frosted cranberry formulation. And I've had questions about Glycerites. And I do want to say that this is the first time I've ever made a Glycerite. So I'm not a great person to ask questions about Glycerites since this is extremely new territory for me. And so if you do have questions about making Glycerites, I highly recommend checking out Lisa's website and her book. So I've linked to those in all of the description boxes for those videos. So definitely check out, her website and her resources, because it is, she knows way more about Glycerites than I do. I'm a complete newbie in that regard. Ruth has a question about trying to get away from palm oil, but substitutes are hard to come by. So yes, palm oil is a very difficult to avoid ingredient. It is a very plentiful and easy to manipulate sort of base ingredient. And so you find that a lot of things, cetyl alcohol, cetyl alcohol, stearic acid, a lot of the emulsifying waxes that we use, a lot of these are or can be derived from palm sources. In soap, I do like to use tallow or lard instead of palm, but obviously that is not a vegan option. Realize Beauty, which is a really lovely blog written by cosmetic chemist Amanda Foxton Hill out of Australia. She's written a couple posts about palm oil, and I recommend giving them a read. It's a challenging topic, and it's really not quite as black and white as it would be nice if it was, right? If it was very black and white, like, yes, done. The general argument kind of for palm oil being that if we wanted to, make and have all of the ingredients that we currently make from palm, from something that wasn't palm, the environmental footprint and impact of that would be substantially larger. So there's an argument to be made for choosing sustainably sourced palm products rather than necessarily trying to avoid it completely. Yeah, I don't have a ton of great advice on that. If you are looking to avoid ingredients like cetyl alcohol, they're very difficult to replace. eDubs has asked, is a glycerite the same as extracts? And can essential oils be turned into extracts with glycerin and water? So a glycerite is a type of extract, I would say. Extract's a very broad term. And can essential oils be turned into extracts with glycerin and water? No, the essential oils, if you just add to glycerin and water, they're just going to float to the top. And usually extracts are more about taking botanical components that are more often, and it depends on the base, like if it's a glycerin or a water based versus, or an alcohol versus oil, the solubility of the different components in the botanical matter. You'll get oil soluble components extracted in an oily base, and you'll get like alcohol and water and glycerin soluble components in one of those bases. So yeah, usually, yeah, essential oils and extracts are typically different and are used differently, like expected to be different. Sheila, I'm trying to make lip balms for friends. My first batch went grainy after a few weeks. I used shea butter. Do you think that was a culprit? Yes, I do. Should I try to cool them down faster? Honestly, my biggest challenge with shea butter and lip balms isn't necessarily the cooling process, so that is definitely a big factor in whether or not things go grainy. Lip balms are really challenging because people often put them in their pockets and they get subjected to heat fluctuations throughout the course of use. So even if you cool it, immaculately, the chances of it going grainy throughout its lifetime are fairly high. So I tend to shy away from using shea butter in lip balms for that reason. You won't really find it in probably any of my formulations that are more than that are younger than 5 years for that reason. So I would probably look into a shea butterless formulation for lip balms. Just to simplify things, especially since we are rapidly approaching the time at which I suspect you wish to give them away, and you won't have a lot of time to really test things and make sorry, losing my train of thought, trying to read questions and answer them at the same time. Yeah, you don't have a ton of time to test and iterate. I got a question about skipping Natropet-P. So I've only used that in one formulation, and please read the partner blog post. There's a list of substitutions in that addresses that. And I would just generally like to stress that for every formulation that I share, there is a partner blog post with lists of substitutions all written out. Please read that post before you ask about substitutions, because I really do try my absolute darndest to make sure that I've addressed absolutely everything there. And also look up the ingredient you're looking to substitute out in the Humblebee and Me Encyclopedia, because I also address substitution suggestions there. A question about Monotov 68/Vegetal. I've never used it, so I'm afraid I don't have any opinions or tips on it. For the passion fruit velvet dry oil mist, can that be used on the face? Yeah, you could for sure. I probably wouldn't choose isopropyl myricate as a primary vehicle. If it was going to be a face thing, I would choose a more expensive lightweight ester. So something like, I think, Nailson's hemisqualane would work. And I would probably prefer that, the feel of that as a facial product. I'm not sure if you intend to still mist it, but I think it would still be mistable. It's still pretty thin. Wendy, I am trying to make hand wash with shea butter. I use polysorbate 80 as the emulsifier in it, but my first batch separated. Yeah, so that's definitely a little bit challenging because the shea butter, because it's going to typically want to be more solid, just using polysorbate 80 to solubilize it will be challenging. I would take a look at, there's a formulation I shared earlier this year. I believe I called it Rich Lavender Cleansing Cream, and it's a completely different formulation structure. We're not just solubilizing like a small amount of oil. It's actually designed as an emulsion, more like a lotion that has added surfactant to it. So I would take a look at that and see if maybe that will work a bit better for you. You can also look for a product called water soluble shea butter. So it's a PEG shea butter. I know that Lotion Crafter sells it, and so that will, because it's a PEG, it's just going to um, self emulsify. So that'll be really easy to work with too, and it's already liquid. Why do you heat the water and oil phase for 20 minutes? Can you just heat it till it melts? Yeah, that is what I do. I don't set a timer for 20 minutes at all. I don't know if I've ever said that I do that. It's definitely like 20 minutes is just generally long enough. Oftentimes it's longer because I go and I do other things. But as long as the oil phase is melted and the water phase, has come to the same temperature, that's totally fine. I tried making lip gloss using the vegan formula. I used soy lecithin and oils, and I did add beeswax. When I filled the tubes, it was perfect, but then it started to solidify. It sounds like you probably used too much beeswax. It can, if you fill a tube when something is hot, obviously it's going to be softer than it will be when it cools down fully. So it sounds like you need to adjust the formulation to use less wax and other thickeners. Let's see here, scrolling up through other questions that I might have missed. Formulating a serum to reduce hyperpigmentation that calls for carrot oil. Is there a big difference between carrot seed oil and carrot oil? I'm pretty sure the seeds of a carrot are about the only thing that you can get oil from, so I think that it must be the same thing. From a hyperpigmentation reducing front, I haven't had a ton of luck, honestly, reducing hyperpigmentation with oil, just like natural plant-based oils. I found ingredients like niacinamide, vitamin B3, N-acetylglucosamine, and vitamin C. I found those to be a lot more effective for that. And the Natra Pep P active that was mentioned earlier in the stream is also a good one to take a look at. So depending on your formulation structure, if it can accommodate some water soluble ingredients and it doesn't contain anything like that, I'd really recommend incorporating some. And for some tips and tricks and information on how to work with those ingredients and how to incorporate them in your formulations, make sure you look them up in the Humblebee and Me encyclopedia. But also read through the FAQ. I've got an article there about incorporating new ingredients. And I also discussed this in the Super Simple Natural Lotion follow-up Q&A. So there's a video and a blog post for that. So if you are looking for that information, that's all there. Sandy, I always am concerned with germs and mold issues when making glycerites and a bit scared to try. What would be the shelf life and do they differ at all? So Lee's advised that, and again, I have made one glycerite ever, so I'm not an expert in this at all. So I really do recommend head over to Lisa's website, buy her book. She's definitely the expert here. So she said that she's had glycerites last upwards of 2 years. So something that's interesting about glycerin is that it reduces water activity. And this is one of the ways that we can boost the performance of preservatives, or with enough of a water activity reducing ingredient, a formulation can become self-preserving. So the Satsuma body wash that I shared, I believe that was back in 2020, that one is a self-preserving formulation because the concentration of glycerin in it is so high that it reduces the water activity so much that basically it can't get into any trouble. Sort of the way I like to imagine it is like if you have a puppy at home and you just leave it up to its own devices, it might eat your couch. But if you give it like a treat, some peanut butter and something that it really has to kind of dedicate attention to getting out of, you have lowered the puppy activity so much that it's not going to get into any trouble. A similar thing to that. For pH testing, do you dip a paper strip into the end product or add it to water and then dip? So generally speaking, for pH testing, if the pH of your formulation is really important, I wouldn't recommend using strips. I have a meter and strips, and sometimes I'll test it with both the strips and the meters, and the difference is like alarmingly far apart. But you will not want to be dipping it straight into your end product, and it is recommended that you dilute it. eDubs, I bought your book and I love it, and I hope there are more books in the future, and say I do too. And for anybody who's unaware, this is my book, Make It Up, and you can buy it pretty much anywhere that they sell books, and it is pretty much it's pretty much entirely about color cosmetics. There's a little bit about skincare at the beginning. So if you are interested in learning how to make makeup, it's a great place to start. And one of the big differentiators between the formulations in the book and on my website is that I work from a much shorter and more sort of globally vetted ingredient list in Make It Up than I do on the blog. On the blog, everything's kind of a standalone project, so I can go crazy, like it's just this one time. Whereas for this, I did really try to make sure that if you bought a shopping list that's roughly $100 US, you could make everything in the book. Can candelilla wax or carnauba wax be a substitute for cetyl alcohol and stearic acid for lipstick base? Yeah, potentially you will need to be doing some redevelopment. The candelilla wax and carnauba wax are very brittle, glossy waxes, whereas cetyl alcohol makes things more creamy and rich. So they're both going to harden a formulation for sure. But if you swap them in equal parts, like if a formulation called for like 30% cetyl alcohol amongst other things, and you swap that just straight for candelilla wax, I think your product would be so hard you probably wouldn't really be able to apply it. Like you'd rub it on the skin and nothing would really happen. So it is possible to make a lipstick base that does not use cetyl alcohol and does use candelilla wax or carnauba wax. If your formulation that you're looking at contains a decent amount of cetyl alcohol and stearic acid, and you wish to use those waxes instead, you will be very firmly in redevelopment territory. Is dimethicone good for bullet lipsticks? It can be. It can be a good ingredient in there. It kind of depends on everything else that is going on. Is there such a thing as organic and natural fragrance oils? Yes, there are. I know you mentioned that you're in the US. Essential Wholesale sells some natural fragrance oils. So I've got the mango one and I've got a passion fruit one that's really lovely from them. They've got a pretty good selection of different fruity fragrance oils. And the general idea there is that they're taking component fragrant ingredients like linalool and then blending those component but naturally derived fragrant compounds to imitate mangoes or passion fruit or whatever. Any plans for a second book dedicated to bath and body products? So definitely buy it. That's not quite what I have in mind at this point in time, but we'll see. Stay tuned. I'm thinking of making holiday skincare products with 24 karat gold mica. When I see products that say 24 karat gold mica is gold infused, is that mica as well? Honestly, that's really going to depend on the product, and you'll have to look at the ingredient list and the inkies that are listed there. A lot of the time, it really is just mica and there's no gold, but sometimes there is. I don't really think there's a lot of benefit to putting gold in your products for the skin. So it's probably just kind of marketing either way. It's just a matter of how much money they put into being able to, or choosing to write gold on the label. What are your opinion, experience, most irritating ingredients that are not necessarily in homemade skincare? Most obviously seen fragrances. Yeah, for me, honestly, the things that are most likely to make my skin upset are actually essential oils. So those would not be necessary. I've had a few people report that they had bad experiences with kombu butter, but that's a pretty niche ingredient. My skin is generally fairly tolerant, but yeah, I would say essential oils would be the big one that is has a highest potential to be really quite irritating and is also often very enthusiastically and perhaps not as responsibly used as could be. The knowledge that essential oils are natural can lead people to feel like they're very safe and something that they can use at any concentration. But essential oils are compounds made by plants without the plant doesn't care that you would like to put this on your face. The plant makes this chemical compound to attract pollinators or to deter predators, and so the blend may or may not be particularly friendly to human skin. So that can be, it's just every essential oil is different, and there's a lot to know. So just yeah, use essential oils responsibly because they can really, really irritate skin. And if you become sensitized to them, that is permanent, unfortunately. So I've become sensitized to citrus essential oils from using old ones, which is a major bummer. And now anything with citrus essential oils in it makes me really, really itchy. And it's been that's just life now for me, which sucks because I really like the smell of essential oils, or sorry, of citrus essential oils. And alas. Scrolling back up in the chat here to see if there's anything I have missed. I think I'm. Nope, here we go. What are your opinions about using charcoal in recipes for mascara and eyeliner? Not recommended because we're talking about your eyeballs, which are important and sensitive. You want to make sure that the anything that you're putting in something that can get into your eyes is eye safe. And so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend charcoal. I would be sticking with cosmetic grade black pigments. So, like, cosmetic grade black iron oxide would be the big one. I have made some eyeliners using cosmetic grade like black dyes, and they dye the skin, and then you just kind of have eyeliner on for a day or two. I don't really recommend going the dye route. Yeah. Ta-da. Oh, I did have some questions about pseudo butters. So I recently shared a lit butter formulation that used a pseudo butter, jojoba butter, and had some questions from people about what can they use instead. And the guidelines in the blog post are basically you could use a different pseudo butter instead. Um, and I've provided, like, they're that vague because there's just so many different pseudo butters out there that it's difficult to recommend a specific one. It's a lip product, so choose something that you like the idea of having around on your mouth. And what you'll want to do is take a look at the inky. So when I say a pseudo butter, um, talk about a butter that's not like really a butter, like a natural butter. So something like shea butter or mango butter, cocoa butter, the fatty acid makeup of those fats, when harvested from those plant sources, create a fat with a consistency that we think of as being buttery, right? Like it's a soft solid or a brittle solid. If you've ever been sort of shopping for a butter and you see, okay, they've got cocoa butter, mango butter, shea butter, and then they have like aloe butter, and you're like, I had a blueberry butter. Like I didn't think you could make butter from blueberries. You can't. When you take a look at the inky, the product will be primarily comprised of hydrogenated vegetable oil, and then if it's something like aloe butter or blueberry butter, it's usually going to have like an extract of those things. And if it's something like almond butter or jojoba butter, it's usually going to have some of that oil in there. So what you're going to want to do is look for a product where when you are on the description page, it's described as a butter, but then you go down to the inky for the ingredient that's listed on the page. It should contain hydrogenated vegetable oil, and then that would be a good place to start. Shell's Piece has asked, I bought some plum oil and cranberry oil from Amazon, but it doesn't have the pleasant aroma I expected. Should I be concerned and maybe stick to ordering direct from the companies that make the product? Yeah, Amazon is a wild, wild west. You can, like, some companies, reputable companies like Mystic Moments and Making Cosmetics do sell their ingredients through Amazon as well. But I have definitely found that carrier oils can be, it's hard to know, right? It's really hard to know what you're getting if you're not familiar with the company or the brand, and the Amazon space is not terribly well regulated. Regulated at all in that regard. So it could be that the product you have is just refined, unlike the ones that I have. It could be that it is a very tiny amount of plum oil blended in with a lot of something cheaper. Yeah, don't really know. So if you are like, I would really recommend getting them from more reputable companies, especially if you are looking for kind of more niche, expensive oils. Like, I wouldn't be worried about ordering coconut oil, for instance, from Amazon, because that's a pretty common and inexpensive oil. But yeah, if you're looking at getting something that they can sell for a higher profit margin and potentially not be as pure to inflate that profit margin, yeah, I would probably buy it from somewhere like Plants Power or Essential Wholesale. My plum oil is from Essential Wholesale and it's lovely. And I have cranberry oil from both Essential Wholesale and Plants Power, and those are both gorgeous. What can be a good substitute for lanolin? Can I use a butter instead? Well, lanolin is a tricky one because it's got a really unique, rich, ointmenty consistency that is like you can try using a butter instead. It won't have the same richness and ointmenty consistency for sure. The other challenge with the butters is that they can go grainy. So depending on the formulation, it might not be a good choice. I do recommend reading the encyclopedia entry on lanolin. I have mentioned a few substitution alternatives there as well. I don't remember all of them right off the top of my head, but yeah, check it out in the Humblebee and Me encyclopedia. Hi, I'm trying to make a solid shampoo bar, but all that's available here is SCS or SLSA. How can I use them? That's great. Those are two fantastic surfactants for making shampoo bars. I'm pretty sure I have one, two, three. I think I have a couple formulations that only use that or a blend of them over at humblebeeandme.com. So I would definitely head over to humblebeeandme.com/search. Type in shampoo bar, and you should be able to find some things. If you find formulations that call for sodium cocoa sulfate, the SCS, and powdered sodium cocoa isethionate, you can use sodium lauryl sulfonyl acetate, the SLSA, instead of SCI. It's just usually for ease of balancing liquid content, you're going to want the format of them to be the same. And so all the SLSA I've ever encountered has been a very fine powder. And so if, a formulation calls for SCI as a powder and you have SLSA as a powder, you can generally make that swap in a shampoo bar pretty easily without any issues. Marine asks, I bought jojoba butter to make your lip butter formulation. What else can I make with it? Well, there will be another formulation using the jojoba butter coming out on Thursday. So there is that. You can use it in like whipped butter formulations for sure. You could make lip balms with it. You could you can treat it like a butter, right? You can make salves with it. You can add a bit of extra wax or something to make it a little bit firmer and more kind of balm-like. You can make tons and tons of stuff with these pseudo butters. They're really versatile, and one of the things that I really like about them is that we do get that buttery consistency, but without the graininess concerns that come with a lot of the true butters. So that's nice. Any other questions? It has been almost half an hour. The lip color that I'm wearing right now is one that is in development. And I teased it at the end of one of my videos recently, but it is totally smudge proof. And I think that's so cool. It doesn't go anywhere and it's not in my hands. And I'm really, really excited to share this formulation with you guys sometime early next year, hopefully. Do I have a recipe for a night cream for mature skin? Nothing that I've explicitly called night cream for mature skin, but kind of one of the beautiful things about being a formulator is developing the ability to read between the lines, to look at a formulation and kind of think what else could this be? And so one that's coming to mind right now is I have a rose cleansing cream. You could totally use that as a night cream for mature skin. I've marketed it as a facial cleanser, but it doesn't contain really any cleansing surfactants. It uses the emulsifying power of just the emulsifier to give it that rinse off, and it's just a really nice, rich, rose-scented cream. You could absolutely use that as a night cream. And for mature skin, if you wanted to amp it up, you could swap out some of the water for a 1% hyaluronic acid solution. You could look at incorporating some awesome ingredients for skin like N-acetylglucosamine, coenzyme Q10 for some added antioxidant benefits. I believe that formulation uses a pretty inexpensive carrier oil. I don't remember which one off the top of my head, but you could swap it out for some more interesting and fancy carrier oils like argan oil, passion fruit oil, um, prickly pear seed oil is a really lovely one for anti-aging. And yeah, there you go. There's like a lovely, rich night cream. Have you ever tried Yogurt Ultra? Yes, I have, and I have shared several formulations using it. So if you go to, I know Yogurt Ultra is one of the preservatives that I have a encyclopedia entry on. So if you go look it up in the encyclopedia and scroll down, all the formulations I've used it in are linked there. Generally speaking, I have enjoyed it and have found it to work well. It definitely causes the pH of your entire formulation to drop quite a lot. So that can be a thing that you need to keep in mind when working with it. I've actually got a formulation coming out sometime in the early new year that I've been working on that will use it as well and takes advantage of its pH lowering. It's a thing you got to keep in mind. If you're going to have like 1.5% of Yogurt Ultra in a formulation, your pH is going to go. So perhaps if it's a surfactant formulation, you use cocoa glucoside, which is on the more basic side of things to kind of balance that out so that things don't get too acidic. I know Yogurt Ultra is actually the preservative I initially started working with when I was developing my super simple all natural lotion, and it caused the pH of the formulation to get so low that the Redomos SCG failed because it does need it doesn't work in really acidic environments, and so that was problematic. And then the other thing with it is it takes a really long time to dissolve, especially if you don't want to heat things. That's just another thing to like keep in mind if you're looking at this and like, gosh, like why hasn't that dissolved yet? Am I doing something wrong? Like, probably not. It takes eons to dissolve. Amy, a question about pH meters a few minutes ago. An overview of yours and the ones you recommend. So I only have one pH meter. They're expensive. They're like $100 something. So I have the one pH meter and I like it. I have more information about it in the encyclopedia. There's an entry on pH meters, so you can click through there to get the full name of it and everything. And then I also touched on it in the recent DIY equipment for beginners. I believe that one was in part 2, so please check that out as well. Mine's made by Apera. It measures pH down to 2 decimal points, which is handy, and does like the full range. Some of the ones that I looked at just did like a little narrow range. It's like, well, that's not super helpful. We want the full range. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, look it up in the encyclopedia if you want the exact name of the model. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I just remember it's blue and it's made by Apera. How do I make a correct dilution of citric acid and water to adjust pHs safely? I usually mix 50% citric acid and 50% distilled water in equal parts by weight to make a 50% citric acid solution. You can make it more dilute if you want to, if you're finding that your formulation is getting too acidic too quickly, especially if you're working with smaller batches. A more dilute solution can be more useful because the smaller the batch, the faster the pH will move when adding acidic or very basic ingredients. So, yeah, and definitely, of course, citric acid is a pretty potent acid. Don't get that solution on you. Wear gloves. Be careful. GMP, lab safety. Please don't give yourself a chemical burn. Wendy, have you ever used rosehip powder in one of your recipes? I'm experimenting with it at the moment in hand wash and shampoo. I'm wondering if you've done something already. If I have, it's been years. I believe rosehip powder is one of the powders that I purchased in quest of a natural colorant that would make a lip stain, and this would have been in 2012, perhaps. My recollections of it were that it's not a very potent colorant for cosmetics and that it does oxidize fairly rapidly. So when added to hydrous formulations, it will be pink for a little while and then it kind of goes gray-brown after a few days. So that's roughly the sum total of my experience with rosehip powder. I had high hopes for it a decade ago, but it didn't end up being something that I really, really loved. A lot of those botanical powders I find I really like in like powder to foam formulations. You could use it and when it's dry, it's going to maintain its color and everything really, really nicely, and you don't have to worry about any preservation challenges because the formulation is dry. And then you add a little bit of water at the time of use and work it up, and you're off to the races. So a recent one that I shared, I did a frosted cranberry powder to foam. Actually, I'm remembering that I made some bath bombs that I colored. Was it with rose? It might have been with beetroot powder. It was a fun way to get the bath bombs to be pink. I find it interesting that in the US, these powdered botanicals are not approved colorants, so you can't use them as a colorant in a formulation, but you can use them in formulations. So it's just a funny little thing where it's like, okay, you can't use it as a colorant, but if you add it to the formulation for other reasons, which you are allowed to do, it will color the formulation, but it's still not a color. I don't pretend to understand all of the nuances of the FDA regulations, that's for sure. Let's see here. I think we'll take just a couple more questions and then wrap up. My dog is making it very apparent that she would really like to go on a walk soon. What are your thoughts on using Sepanov EMT10 to thicken shower gels and face washes? I know to avoid cationic ingredients, so I'm still struggling with it and thickness. I'm honestly not sure if I've ever worked with that ingredient before. So I don't think I have any advice. One thing that I would really recommend is reading through. I've got a 2-part blog series on how to research your ingredients, part 1 and part 2, and it talks about all the different information to look for and tons of different places to find it. That's the part 2. So definitely recommend reading through that to sort of hone your research skills for when you are trying to work with a new ingredient and learn about it. For something like this, one of the best things that I find to be incredibly helpful is looking for sample formulations, very often from the company that has manufactured the ingredients, and see how they've used it. What percentage are they using it? What are they using it with? What manufacturing methods are they recommending? What are they doing? They're the ones who develop the ingredients. So generally speaking, they know how to use it, right? And they also want you to know how to use it. It's like when you went to the grocery store in the 90s and they'd have like those little pads that you could peel off a recipe for, to teach you how to use tomato soup in a new and exciting way. All the manufacturers of cosmetic ingredients do exactly the same thing. They will give you tons of sample formulations to teach you how to use their ingredients because they want you to use them, because they want you to buy them. So definitely look for sample formulations. They're crazy helpful. I know Making Cosmetics and Lotion Crafter both also have really good databases of sample formulations for you to learn how to use all kinds of different ingredients. So definitely, check those out. Thank you, Lumeri Studio. Thank you for your support. E-Dubs, I bought a bubble bath base and added my own fragrance, but the consistency turned really liquidy. Yeah, fragrances and surfactants there's definitely just some like fun interactions that can happen there. And you're just like, what what? Come on. One of my favorite examples of that is if you go to humblebeeandme.com/search and search for curdling body wash. I discovered that a combination of caprylyl and caproglucoside and cocoa butter betaine that had been thickened with hydroxyethyl cellulose was just, chef's kiss, beautiful. Unless you added a fragrance that contained benzyl benzoate, in which case the entire thing turned into a curdled, sloppy mess. So you're not yes, adding fragrances to surfactant products can sometimes just make things go cattywampus. To re-thicken it, Crothix didn't do anything. Hey, oh, bummer. I was going to say Crothix is usually one of the more reputable, not reputable. It's one of the ones that I have found is a little less susceptible to fragrancy interactions. I've definitely found that like natural gums plus surfactants plus fragrant compounds, there's all kinds of snot that you can make with those combinations of ingredients. So I probably wouldn't try a gum. You could try salt thickening. It's really hard to say without knowing what's in the bubble bath base. And of course you presumably can't share that because it's either a formulation that you've purchased that's not mine, or it's a formulation, pre-made product. Bummer. I guess you could also sort of just think about it from a point of view of it's not a flaw, it's a feature. So maybe Maybe your bubble bath is just a very thin, drizzly thing that you can dispense drop by drop, and you did that on purpose. uh, yeah, I've definitely done that with formulations in the past. I'm like, I'm just going to sort of reframe how thick I wanted this to be. And sometimes, yeah, a little bit of a marketing pivot can be easier than solving a formulation problem if it's, a reasonably small thing. Obviously, if it's like moldy or makes your skin burn, that's not so much. But if it's just like a little thinner than you wanted to, maybe you just like incorporate that into the product description, especially if you're pressed for time. Yeah. All right. Well, so yeah, it's been about 40 minutes. I think I've answered all the questions. I'm planning on doing another one of these next week. I am thinking I'll probably shift the time a little bit to try and cater to people in different time zones for whom this time didn't work for. Can tapioca starch be used in a cleansing bar with SCI? Yes, absolutely. I've done some with SCI and cornstarch, so yeah, you can use tapioca starch instead of cornstarch. Give it a try, see what happens. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna sign off now. As a reminder, if you're looking at any of my formulations, please read the partner blog posts because there's just tons of extra awesome information in the blog posts. Read that substitutions list, look up the ingredients in the encyclopedia to learn what they're for, what they do, substitutions, where to buy them, shelf life, how much you should buy. There's just tons and tons of information in the encyclopedia. I'm quite proud of it. Yeah, thank you so much. Best of luck with all your holiday making. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you later.